peg. Let's go big picture here. Our annual Peach Jam special, that's going to be, frankly, the best one yet. All right, so MoKan, coincidentally enough, a program that obviously Kansas is quite connected to. MoKan, short for Hello, Missouri, Kansas. They win Peach Jam. We'll get to that in a second. I do want to, I feel like there are actually multiple news pegs coming out of Peach Jam, Adam.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
I think we have to start with GG Jackson only because now it was expected. He was going to reclassify and then he was going to commit to South Carolina. So we can take this a number of ways. I'm going to the floor is yours, my man. But let me cue you up this way. One, GG Jackson reclassifying. Is he still in your mind now the number one player in 22? And two, for South Carolina fans that are juiced about this, big picture, how impactful do you think he's going to be with the Gamecocks this season? I say that because in talking to a few coaches, some of the feedback I got was interesting talent, but some coaches who saw him aren't even convinced that he's going to be like a top 25 level player in college next season. But do you disagree with that assessment from some coaches who saw him in person?
Well, there's two levels to this evaluation in my mind. There is how he projects at the college level and then how he projects at the NBA level, because with this move, he's now eligible for the 2023 NBA draft. So we'll start with college. You asked the question, is he the top ranked prospect in the class of 2022? The answer to that is no. Nick Smith, who's going to Arkansas, will maintain that spot. Frankly, I don't think he's number two either. I think that goes to Derek Lively, who's going to Duke. The 2023 recruiting class, even with the amount of players that it lost, whether through overtime elite, G League, or reclassifying to 2001, is still a much better group than the class of 2023 from top to bottom. The reason why that's important is because it speaks to the caliber of the subsequent draft. So GG Jackson, while he would have remained the top ranked prospect in the high school senior class of 2023, as a college freshman, he's top 5, maybe top 10, but not number 1. And he is an interesting talent. He is a guy who is certainly provides. And listen, let's start with this. For Lamont Paris, home run, obviously. I believe this was the initial plan with Frank Martin. When Frank Martin was the head coach at South Carolina, it had been widely speculated that GG Jackson would commit there, would end up reclassifying and ending up there as soon as this, potentially even earlier than he did now. So this, I believe, was the initial plan. There was some speculation that he always wanted to go to North Carolina. I think there was a little bit of a divided house in terms of his parents and where they wanted him. But when Frank Martin gets fired, it opens things back up because they had been very clear with that administration that Frank Martin was their guy. So Frank Martin gets fired anyway. And at that point, that's where North Carolina becomes the option. Obviously, Lamont Paris comes in. They continue to work that. They flip the commitment. And the fact that he becomes draft eligible a year earlier is significant because at North Carolina, the roster is much better. They don't have the immediate opportunity for GG to go in and make the splash that he can now theoretically make at South Carolina. The question is, and you alluded to this, what is he capable of doing year one for a first-year head coach on a roster that is not considered to be in the top half of the SEC? For me, that is a fair question. I think offensively, he's a guy that right now really wants to stretch his game to the perimeter. He calls himself, he's a 4 who wants to be a 3 who's actually closer to a 5 in my mind. He's at his best around the rim where his physical tools can really shine, but he shows potential putting the ball on the floor and long-term as a shooter. That's going to be more important, I think, when you start to project him out to the NBA. But what he's not is a polished shot creator or someone you can build your half-court offense around next year, to the point many of the coaches you talked to were making. So, and then from an NBA standard, you project him out and you say, okay, we think he's going to be able to shoot. We think he's going to be able to put the ball on the floor a couple of times. But is he as versatile defensively as we want him to be? And that's been the concern that I've heard the most from NBA scouts, because those have been the people I've been talking to most. And they said, they list him at 6'9". He may be 6'8". In our world, he's closer to a 5. And that prototype, there's just not a high demand for right now. So we need to see how mobile and how switchable he is next year at South Carolina. So to summarize, I think he certainly makes an impact at South Carolina. It's a great boost of momentum, but this is not a plan that is without risk. He's going to have all eyeballs on him. NBA scouts are going to be watching his every move. Local South Carolina fans are going to be watching his every move. There is going to be a lot of pressure on a young freshman who's coming in without having the benefit of summer session and really going to be looked on as a bit of a savior. And I'm not sure he's quite ready for all that.
You're hitting on so many themes that I've heard from coaches. First of all, I'm an absolute height truther with GG Jackson. He ain't 6'9". He's not like, and whatever. Just he's 6'8". If he was like 6'7 3/4, I'd believe it. But they're as you well know, like NBA people, they care about that stuff a ton. He's not that big. The shot creation, it's like blatantly obvious when you see him and when you see him in person. I did get to see him in person at Peach Jam. He had a showcase game against the New Jersey Scholars that CP3 won. But a coach was telling me that they're rooting for him to do well, but for both him and Lamont, this concoction has so much potential downside to it in terms of you're going to bring this guy in. Lamont's been with the rest of the team. Like maybe they had designs on getting him and all that stuff, but you're going to, how quickly will the chemistry work? How much should be on GG Jackson's shoulders? He's a local product. It's South Carolina basketball. What should be the level of expectation there? Yeah, if you're a South Carolina fan, you should be extremely excited that this guy's coming. But I just had a few coaches, because what I try and do is the coaches that have seen him play like you in person way more times than I, just give me a feel of like what you see with this guy. And I even had one coach tell me he doesn't even see him as a one and done talent. Like he thinks that he's going to get to college and actually prove to be like kind of, maybe he'll go after the first year, Adam, and be like the 21st pick or whatever. But really, in terms of him blooming to where he could go to the NBA and have more immediate impact, one coach who's power conference coach was saying he wouldn't be surprised to see if it took Jackson 2 years.
Well, that to me is the other variable that's really interesting because, as I alluded to, the 2023 NBA draft, this is next June, is projected to be a really good one. So rushing to the money, which we've seen a lot of kids, like Jalen Duren and Amani Bates did this exact same thing last summer. They played Peach Jam and then they said, hey, I'm going to college in Jalen Duren's case so I can get to the draft as far as I can. I even think Amani Bates, perhaps foolishly, I think his camp thought they were going to be able to get to the draft, even though he wasn't age eligible, but they thought somehow they were going to be able to get some sort of exception. So this is not abnormal. Jonathan Kuminga did the same thing. There's a long list. But the 2023 draft is a very good one right now. 2024, which equates to this current high school year that GG Jackson just left, that's one where we can't figure out who the new number one is. I know we're going to get into that later, but like that's a draft that if I were in charge of a prospect or advising a prospect, I'd say, hey, you got a lot more upside in that one. A lot of chance to go higher in the draft. And given the state of NIL right now, maybe we can bridge this gap, keep you in high school for a year. Because here's the other thing, Matt. Kids are getting NIL to stay in high school. So, you can, there were ways to kind of, in years past, it's, as I said, a run to the money. But I do think there was kind of a strategy on the board that could have showcased his abilities and protected him a little bit more. I mean, he is fully exposed in this year at South Carolina. I'm not saying he's not going to do well. I'm just saying we're going to find out because this is not a situation that is tailor-made to protect him.